During President Obama's 8 years in office, Congress failed to pass legislation to address key issues in the country's current immigration system, like the status of young people who were brought here as children and grew up without documentation. President Obama signed an executive order in 2012 that gave some young people protection from deportation so they could attend school or work. Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA, offers temporary protection, and it's not yet clear if President-elect Donald Trump will reverse the program once he takes office in January. Now, according to the Migration Policy Institute, more than 7,000 people applied for DACA protection by June of 2016 in New Mexico, and even more may have been eligible for DACA. Our producer, Sarah Gustavus, sat down recently with 3 students who have DACA protection to talk about what may be ahead.
With me today is Rafael Martinez, a PhD candidate in American Studies at UNM. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
We also have Abdiel Ramirez, an engineering student at UNM. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And Cindy Nava, UNM graduate student in Educational Leadership and Policy. Glad to have you back.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I want to start kind of far back for each of you. You're students now, but when did you first learn about your legal status in the U.S.? When did you first become aware that you didn't have documentation? Cindy, let's start with you.
Okay, sure. I learned that I didn't have documentation ever since I was younger. I mean, I think it was probably in elementary. My parents were always very careful about what I was to be doing and what I was not to be doing. They always encouraged me to be a good student and to follow the rules. And then they also told me that there were certain things that I was not going to be able to do. And I think we know it, many of us knew it as children, but we didn't get the full concept and understanding of what it really meant until we were interested in things like driving, or things like getting a job, or things like traveling to places where our friends were going for even vacation, or I remember our 8th grade trip, or the senior trip, things like that. That's when it gets really, I think, when the facts start to sink in.
Rafael, what about you? And what I imagine when Cindy's talking about going on trips and things, also teenagers tend to get in trouble, maybe. So it could be really a dangerous thing to interact with police if you don't have papers.
No, definitely. Very much similar to Cindy's story. I always knew I was undocumented ever since I was a child. And really, when it really hits is when you go into high school and go into college. And those are kind of rites of passages that everybody thinks of, whether you're a citizen or not, for all the exciting different reasons. And so definitely, driving was one of them. All my friends in high school were getting their licenses and wondering why I was not getting one. And then, moving forward after that, like 18, or you get into college and people starting wanting to go out, wanting to, go for a drink, go to clubs or things like that, go to parties. And it's like, why is everybody showing their ID and you're showing your Mexican identification card? This green thing that identifies you as being somewhat different, so to speak. And so those are the little things that you were always kind of grew up, and my mom was always in the back of my mind. Don't do this because X, Y, and Z is going to happen. And so you really grow up with that, and as Americans would call being straight edge, so to speak, because you know that the consequences, or you don't have certain privileges as other people would have.
Abdiel, what about you? Is this your experience as well?
Yeah, it was very similar. So I grew up in Arizona, and so growing up, I had very typical childhood. I played sports, did one school, that sort of thing. I was involved, but like Rafael mentioned, it wasn't until later when it was Arizona, had some very strict immigration laws that they were passing, and so that happened, during my teenage years, and that's when it kind of, brought into light all those issues for me, and then, which is the reason, my family moved to New Mexico, but also the reason, when I was looking at driving and all these other things, that those kind of things played into that.
SB 1070, that's the law in Arizona that allowed law enforcement to ask anyone to show their papers for living in the United States.
Right, yes.
Yeah. Cindy, you've been interviewed by local media, by national media, including the Washington Post, about DACA, about your immigration status. What does that mean to you to be visibly out there, to be putting yourself out there and speaking publicly?
Well, it definitely didn't happen throughout my whole life. I mean, I think the first interview that I finally did, where I shared my story, was just in 2015. And that was when I came completely clear about what my status was. And it was when I got interviewed by the Washington Post. And it was an opportunity for me to tell the story of many of us, because I'm not the only person with the story as such. And I felt that I had the responsibility to share the story, because I represent so much more than myself. And, you know, the notion of fear has always lived within our communities, within our families. So to me, I would never identify as saying that I've been unafraid, because that would be a complete lie. Because fear exists and has existed regardless of having DACA or not. But being interviewed and being on a national stage or a statewide stage is definitely, you know, putting ourselves out in a vulnerable place. But I feel that it should be way beyond just telling a story of ourselves to be egotistical about it. It's about the broader purpose of really creating change in a unified fashion and not doing it just for the spotlight.
Because the idea is that immigration reform has not happened at the national level, do you hope that people hear your story and they would think differently about what's possible for future immigration policy?
Absolutely. I feel that by sharing our very diverse stories, that I hope that others can hear our voices, that we are all very different and that we come from, you know, distinctive backgrounds but similar stories, but with different passions, different motives, and, you know, our plans of action are so diverse. But I want them to know that we are all really passionate about this country that has given us opportunity, and that we are all truly interested in inherently giving back to making the country, you know, the best it can be through the work that our ancestors and our grandfathers and our families have already laid the groundwork for.
Avdiel, you don't really consider yourself to be an activist until now. Why are you speaking out about this issue now?
For me, it was, I never really thought about it in my field. So I'm studying computer engineering, like I had mentioned before, and I guess in that field, it never really came up, right? So my interest didn't lie in the, you know, the policy work or the government work. Mine was always technology, right? So that's what I liked, that's what I enjoyed, and when I went to UNM, that's what I got involved in. So there was never really an avenue for me within the normal kind of movement to express myself, to really feel like I identified right with what other people were doing. So my, you know, background and experience is very, very different for that reason, in my perspective.
Do you feel like a lot of the coverage of DACA students so far has treated this group of people as kind of having one story, all being the same?
I think so. At least for myself and my experience, you know, my background, my interests and stuff aren't really covered, you know, as being, you know, the stereotypical, you know, student, and, you know, what they like, what they do, you know, what kind of things they're interested in, what their career goals are. So for me, that would definitely be the case.
Mm-hmm. Rafael, DACA was an executive order from President Obama, so it's unknown what's going to happen next in the Trump administration. What's on your mind right now as you think about the future of the program?
Sure. So having been, I started college when I was in 2004. That's when I started undergrad year. And so if we go back to when the original DREAM Act was introduced, you know, that was a very different time period. And I call it a transition from going from the shadows into going outside of those shadows and being more public, right? Similar to the stories that we're hearing here today. And so what has happened now since that particular period of the DREAM Act introduction to this time period has been, you know, visibility, right? We had the 2006 marches where people were surprised the giant has awoken and, you know, out in the streets and things like that, as well as other legislation and other bills that have passed that have really gained momentum for immigrant communities. So now that we fast forward into what we have to lose, or what we have to look out for, is that we're not going to be relegated back to those shadows. You know, the consciousness development that has been created at this point through the movement, but also through education, through gaining, jobs, gaining professionalization, is now how do we use our skill sets to make sure that our communities are not relegated back to those shadow positions. And so really going into this upcoming year, that's what's in the back of our minds, really creating these spaces to make sure that our allies are informed and educated on how they could help undocumented students, but how they could also help undocumented communities to make sure that we're not being brought back to these position of being in the shadows.
Cindy, you mentioned earlier saying you wouldn't ever say that you're not afraid. Do you think the community is afraid right now? Is there fear out there in conversations among family members and friends?
I mean, I absolutely think there's fear, but it's not something new to us, Sarah. We've lived in fear. Our families have lived in fear. So we've always lived careful lives. That's what I felt like. Always trying to do what's best, what's good for the community. So that's nothing new to us. That's nothing new to the communities. And I don't think we should be using fear as a resource, nor putting it out into the community as a strategy tactic. Rather, we should be unifying our community members. We should be educating ourselves and investing the time to strategize and to come up with ideas of what the next step will be, rather than investing in fear tactics. Because we don't win anything by doing that. The fear has lived there, within our communities. So it's nothing new. So I don't think we should be investing the time in getting our families into panic modes. Rather, instead of doing that, we should be constructive and really forcifying and giving resources and maximizing on them.
In order for immigration reform to pass and for, say, the protections under DACA to exist in a broader legislation beyond an executive order, there would need to be bipartisan support. What do you think that young people such as yourself can offer to the conversation to address concerns like making sure dangerous people are not coming into the country, making sure there's a process of legal requirements that people have to follow? What do you think you can offer to that discussion to people who may be skeptical?
Absolutely, and I totally understand. And similarly to Abdiel, I studied political science, and there were not many of me's within my classes and within my program. So I always found myself sort of lonely. But I am deeply passionate about the legislative process, about policy. So I found myself very lonely in those areas as a DACA student, as a dreamer, whatever we identify as. But it has provided us, I think, the opportunity to demonstrate the diversity within us. So to me, I feel that each one of us has a tremendous amount of strength. Abdiel in engineering, Rafael within academia, and the many other DACA students out there, because we bring in different perspectives, different backgrounds. And I think we are individuals who can have a dialogue. We could sit down. And I think many of us have already done that with people of the opposite side, and people who perhaps don't understand us because they've never had anyone in the similar situation, or they don't really understand what it means to be a DACA student or a dreamer or undocumented. So I think it is our responsibility to educate them and to let them know that we are not just here to go against the system, because that's, at least to me, that's not how we get things done. And I think that we are here to bring different perspectives and to contribute to once again, to the state, to the country, and to the future of tomorrow. So I think we have a whole lot of strength to bring in.
Rafael, you study American history and culture, and how do you put your own experience within that? So much that you can talk about.
No, definitely. And within that scope, I very much study immigration policy, immigration studies, and so forth. And one of the things that I always like to highlight is that, contrary to popular belief or media reports, is if you really look at the statistics of the folks who are being deported for a serious crime, the percentage is very low, very extremely low. So in terms of that narrative that's being constructed as immigrant threat, it falsifies information. And as everybody who's sitting here in the table can testify to those things, but not only us who are sitting in this table, but our community members. They're hardworking people. They're people who are doing right, so to speak. And so how do we create a system that is not divisive against people like those, right, as our community members. And the way to do it, I think, is, again, going back to this notion that we're educated now. We're professionals. So we should have a seat at that table to be able to talk to politicians, to academics, to policymakers, and so forth, to be able to educate our communities, you know? And so I think having a spot in that table is very important for us to be able to make some of those decisions and inform the greater public on what should be the right moves to make.
Abdiel, what are your hopes of what policymakers would do next?
Well, I think it's going off a little bit of what Cindy and Rafael said, is using DACA as a blueprint, right? Looking at its successes and, you know, everything, how the economy has benefited, how all these students have benefited, how their communities have benefited, and, you know, expanding that program to affect more people, right? And like Rafael mentioned, realizing that a lot of the stereotypes or the negative narratives aren't necessarily true, and that would be my hope for future policy and stuff.
And you just renewed your DACA protection. If nothing changes at the federal level, that would last until 2018.
That's correct.
What do you
yes.
want to do next for your own educational goals?
So I'm applying to PhD programs. So hopefully I'll be pursuing a PhD in computer engineering here in the next fall.
Interesting. Cindy, there's been some talk of making colleges and universities in New Mexico sanctuary campuses where officials would not cooperate with immigration officials. Do you think that would make students feel safer?
I think it's a great way to go. I mean, we've seen it happening all over the country. Abdiel and I had the opportunity to travel to LA now in November for a gathering that was put on by the Mexican government, and it brought 119 DACA students together from all ages, professionals, undergrads and graduate students, and we talked about the same ideas. And a lot of them were already implemented in their institutions. So I think it is exactly what we need to begin, a sense of relief, I think, for the student body, and to feel supported by our state and by our local institutions as a primary gateway into what we really need to be done for the rest of the community across the country.
And I just wanted to add to that a little bit. I'm part of the faculty at UNM that has created the letter that we have given President Frank just a few weeks ago, and asking him to turn UNM into a sanctuary campus. And as you mentioned, essentially what that means is that saying that the UNM campus will not collaborate with DHS in providing information to be able to apprehend students, so to speak. But more than that, what we're arguing with this letter that we've already presented to the president and now just recently to the regents is basically letting them know that these things matter. If UNM is a public campus, and most New Mexico State institutions are public campuses, and their mission and their goal is to protect the safety of all students, then the idea should be that this language matters to students, saying that the day of tomorrow they could feel welcome, feel safe in this environment, but more importantly also for our parents to know that when we leave home every day, we're going to be able to come back without any fear, so to speak.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you all for joining us this week and sharing your experiences and thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you.